Now we are going to start creating the background. We're going to start by adding a radial gradient that looks something like a sunset. Compositionally, I think it's going to be best if the sun is directly behind Angus. However, that would mean that he would be backlit, and so the front of him would be completely dark with a rim light around him. But I actually want him to be lit from the right side and have a reflected light from the left. So I'm going to add a second light source, a stronger light source, perhaps from a street light or something. All right, so we're going to have a very stylized sort of sunset in the background. To create the sunset, make sure the background group is selected and opened, and add a new layer. Name it Sunset. Now we've been working with the gradients extensively in part 1, but we haven't actually created our own custom gradient yet. So to do that, make sure you've clicked on the gradient tool, click on the color bar up here, and you can select any color preset you like. I'm going to select just this first one. This is based on the colors that are currently in my toolbar, but we're going to completely change them anyway, so it doesn't really matter what color they are. These squares on the top and bottom of this color bar are called stops. The ones on the bottom control color. You can change those by clicking on the color swatch and then modifying the hue here in the right bar. Let's make this one kind of a bright yellow. And then let's make another one over here. That'll be a deep red. The stops on top are the opacity stops, and when they're selected, we should see 100% down here. So both of those should be 100. I want some more colors here in the background, so I'm going to click just near the color bar here and add some more colors. I'm going to put a sort of a pinkish magenta in here, kind of like that, and maybe even a little bit stronger, lighter pink. Maybe something like that. All right. Let's add a stronger orange here. So I'll click in here. Something like that. Now the closer together these color stops are, the more defined edge you're going to get when you create your gradient. So this first part is going to end up being the sun, and then this will be the background. So I want these actually to be fairly close together, something like this. Once you are happy with your new gradient, click the New button, and it will add it to your gradient presets, and it'll be saved with your document. So let's say OK. Now make sure you switch over here to the radial style, click and drag behind Angus, and we get something like that. Now let's play around with making this a little bit stronger by duplicating this layer. If nothing's selected, Command J will duplicate the layer. So with Sunset Copy selected, I want to try some different blend modes. I think the color burn is working the best. I like the way that looks, but I would like to have more yellow in the sun itself. So I could do that a couple of ways. I could either add another layer on top and use foreground to transparent with a yellow, or I could add a layer mask to the Sunset Copy layer. Layer masks are critical to working non-destructively. You can add a layer mask by clicking the third button down here, Add Layer Mask. Just click it once. If you click it twice, you're going to get another mask, and this is a vector mask. We're going to be talking about vector masks in another tutorial. I'm going to get rid of this one for now. So with the layer mask selected, I'm going to make sure I have radial selected and foreground to transparent, which would be the second setting here. And I want to make sure I'm on black. So remember, you can hit D to get to pure black and white, and X to toggle between black and white. And I'm going to click roughly in the center of the sun and drag out. Do it a couple of times. So I get something like that. Now I'd like to add a pattern on top of this. I'm going to use the same pattern that we created for the tie in the previous tutorial. So that would be the red stripe. I'm going to increase the scale a bit. Somewhere around 155. And then I'm going to explore different blend modes. This group in here will make the stripes go darker and the white disappear. This group will make the white appear again and make the stripes brighter. I'm going to go again with the color burn in this case. Now I would like to hide the stripes that are in the middle of the sun here. So again, I'm going to use the layer mask. Click on the layer mask. Make sure that you have the radial gradient selected and you have foreground to transparent, the second preset, and your foreground color is black. Black conceals, white reveals. And we may do this a couple times to get rid of those stripes where the sun is. Now I also want to make sure there are no stripes on the top here. So I'm going to actually add a linear gradient to the top. So I'm going to click somewhere just above his head and drag down. This time I'm going to hold the Shift key to make sure it stays straight. Maybe pull that down a little bit more so that these stripes tend to fade away. You can check out what your mask looks like by pressing Option and clicking on the mask. You could modify the mask here, again if you wish. Option click reveals your image once again. All right, now I'd like to make the background richer, darker, more dramatic, and I want to create that sense of light coming from the right side, from a street lamp or something. In order to make it look like there's light coming from the right side, we're going to have to make the background fairly dark. So I'm going to start by adding a dark tone on the left. And I'm going to use a blue tone for this. Use the linear gradient. Click and drag. Hold down the Shift key. I'm going to drag it quite a ways over. Maybe drag it out again. Change the blending mode to multiply and see how that works. Okay, that's kind of nice. Maybe I'll lower the opacity a little bit. Somewhere around 90. Now I'm going to add the turquoise reflected light. I'm going to sample the turquoise on his jacket. Click and drag it out. Maybe have it come down at a little bit of an angle. Now I'm going to look at some different blend modes on this. I'm thinking that linear light might be nice. Okay, I like that. Now let's add some dark tone around the top. And I'll sample this dark blue. I'm going to zoom out a little, pressing Command minus. Click and drag down from the top. Something like that. I think a little tone in the lower right would be nice as well. So, say dark tone, lower right. I'm going to sample this red color and then go darker. I'll try that on multiply or color burn. No, I guess multiply would be good. Okay, now we're going to add the street light. Let's make a new layer for it. Let's call it street light. Now to create the light, we're going to use the lasso tool. The lasso tool is the third from the top. If you click and hold, you're going to see there's three varieties of the lasso tool. There's the regular lasso, which is just sort of free form. You can just click and draw. And then there is the polygon lasso where you click and release, move, click, release, click, 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 and then you'd hit the return key to close it. By holding down the Option key, you can make either one of these behave like the other one. So if I'm using the lasso tool, I'm going to start up here on my right and actually make the street light now. So I'm going to hold down the Option key, and I'm going to click, release, click, 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 and release. So that's using the regular lasso tool. If I use the polygon, then I don't need the Option key, and I can just click, release, click, 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 and then you'd hit return to close the path. All right, so we're going to hit G for the gradient tool. I want to make sure I'm in linear gradient and foreground to transparent. D and toggle back to white. And then click and make a nice long slow drag across the selection. And then deselect. I want to get rid of this hard edge, so I'm going to add a blur. So that's under Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur. I'm thinking, I've got mine set at 36. I think that's about right. Click OK. It's a little hot, so I'm going to lower the opacity. I might move it around a little bit. I'm going to take my Move tool and maybe adjust this off to the right just a bit. I think that looks pretty good. I think I'll add just a little bit of a blue tone up here in the corner. So I'll just call it blue tone upper right. And I'll sample some of this blue from the jacket. I think I'm going to use the radial and foreground to transparent. Let's see what this looks like. And maybe I need to put that on something to brighten it up. Maybe I'll try one more. Go with a lighter blue. And go back to linear and see how this works. I think that works a little better. And I'm just going to leave it on normal. I might lower the opacity a little bit. Okay, there's one more thing I'd like to do. I think I would like the reflected light to be a little bit more intense. So I'm going to select the reflected light layer and duplicate. You could do Command J. And it's a little bit too intense right now. So I'm going to lower the opacity just a little bit. And I can play with that a little bit more once I get all of the rest of the rendering done on Angus. All right, so now I'm going to start adding shadows to the head, the horn, and the ears, as well as some reflected light, and bring in some of the background color into Angus to help integrate him with the background. So I'm going to go ahead and close up background and twirl open face. We're going to work with brushes for this part of the tutorial. Haven't talked about brushes yet. Brushes are one of Photoshop's most powerful and most complicated tools. So the brushes are located right over here with the pencil tool, and we have a couple of ways to modify brushes up here at the top. If you click this first downward arrow here, what you're going to bring up are the brush presets. So we got tons of presets already set up for us. There are just a couple of parameters that we're able to modify here, and that is size and the hardness. Okay, so then the next icon over brings up the brushes settings panel, and this panel is just loaded with all kinds of features and options and possibilities. You notice when I turn on the shape dynamic, the little preview down here changes. That's because I'm using a pressure sensitive tablet, and this is set for pen pressure. The size of the brush is going to vary depending on how hard I press. Most of you, I'm guessing right now, are working with a mouse, so I will uncheck this for now, because this is what it will look like when you're working with a mouse. I'm going to go ahead and close that up and go back here to the presets. I do want to set this for about 400. So I'm going to have a size of around 400 and a hardness of 0. We need to make a new layer above Angus shadow here. I can go to the head reflected light. That's the top layer in the face group. And I'll call this one face darken shadow. I'm going to select a dark color from his suit here. Now I am going to turn on the Enable Airbrush Style Buildup effect. So with this turned on, as you're painting, if you slow down, you're going to add more paint, just as if you were holding down the nozzle of a spray can. More paint will come out. So I'm going to set the flow to 40% and see how it goes. And I know that if I slow down, I can add more paint. So I'm going to go right along the side here and then bring it on over to his head, trying to give his head a little bit of a shape, and then back in here, darker on this side. And maybe along the bridge of the nose. We are going to have to put some on the nose itself, but let's finish this one up. I'm going to put a reflected light here. So this would be reflected light. I don't think I have a layer called that already. And I will make it a clipping mask, sample the blue from either from his coat or from the blue background, and paint it along the edge here. Maybe I'll try the blue from the background. That's a little lighter. Okay, I think that works pretty well. I think I'll put the darken shadow on multiply and then reduce the opacity a little bit. Let's do the same thing to the ear. So I'm going to select the ear layer. So we go to the top layer of the ear, make a new layer, and this would be left ear, darken. I'm going to darken it first. And I'll choose the dark color again from here. I'm still on the airbrush mode here at 40%, so that gives me a little bit of leeway to add up color gradually. Something maybe like that, and then I will add the reflected light. So this would be left ear reflected. Use previous layer. Sample the blue from the jacket perhaps, and then add that in here. Let's darken the inside of the ear. New layer. So this would be left ear inside darken. Now obviously you can come up with shorter names. I'm really spelling these out just so that it's clear what I'm doing, but you can come up with some kind of code yourself. But I do encourage you to keep on naming the layers if you possibly can. Make it a clipping mask, and let's choose the dark color here and see about darkening the inside of the ear. And let's add a little bit of the blue to this portion right here. So that would be, again, left ear inside reflected. And make it a clipping mask. I'm going to choose the blue from the jacket and try putting it in there like that. I might sample some of the blue from the background and bring that in as well. The inside ear darken, I will put on multiply just to get it darker, and I really like it quite dark. I might try a different blend mode on the ear so that it's not quite so dark. think I'll go with the overlay. And I do need to add some more color to that end, I think. Fairly happy with that. Let's add some color to the ridge of the nose. And this will be in this purple range, just to give it a little bit of a shape. I'm going to make the brush a little bit smaller by hitting the left square bracket. Try multiply. Works pretty well. All right, let's try the horns. So this one I want to be a fairly intense darken. I notice I'm not getting the result I want, and I check over here in my layers panel, and I see it is at the bottom of the clipping mask stack. I'm going to move it up to the top of that stack so that I cover the entire horn. I think I'll give it a little bit of a shade here, like that. We have to start talking about layer masks. Layer masks let us hide or reveal certain parts of a layer. So we create a layer mask by clicking this button right down here. And we paint on layer mask with either black or white. So black conceals and white reveals. I want to make this point a little bit sharper, a little bit more defined. So I'm going to make the brush smaller and toggle with the X key and paint with black to bring out that edge. So all I'm doing is hiding a portion of the shadow. All right, let's add a little bit of reflected light to that shadow, to that horn as well. So it's left horn. And I will select some of this blue and see how that goes. Maybe select some of the lighter blue from what I got on the ear here. And I think that works fairly well. Let's take a look at the left horn shadow and maybe put that one on multiply. Yeah, I think that's better. Okay, let's do the right horn. So this will be right horn shadow. Use previous layers of clipping mask. Let's go back into the purple colors and let's bring that on down here and around the bottom. I'm going to make the brush a little bit bigger by pressing the right square bracket and bringing it up. That didn't turn out quite as purple as I wanted because I sampled this color from the face. So I'm going to sample a little bit of purple from the jacket and add that to this. And then maybe a darker color for the bottom here. It's getting a little strong, so I'm going to lighten the opacity a little bit. Now, one thing we need also is a cast shadow from this horn. So let's go ahead and make a new layer. So this would be right horn, cast shadow. And I'm just going to use a, I think I'll just use the same color and sort of paint it down like this. And then I'm going to add a layer mask in order to shape it. So I add the layer mask. I'm going to increase my flow and then try to shape this mask a little bit, and then try to shape this shadow a little bit. I can make the brush much larger, lower the flow, and kind of fade out the end here so that it's not quite so strong. Fade out the end so that the horn is strongest, so that the shadow is strongest right near the horn. Let's try a multiply on that one and perhaps lower the opacity a little bit. Feels pretty good. Okay. Now let's work on the nose itself. Now let's work on the glasses a little bit. Let's first of all add a shadow below the glasses. So I'm going to select the glasses layer. And I want to actually be below the glasses. So I'll add a new layer and I'll just call it Glasses Cast Shadow. And I'll drag it below the glasses. It doesn't need a clipping mask. I'll go with a dark color from the glasses, I think. And make my brush smaller. And now I'm going to paint across the, I need to crank up the flow here a little bit. And change the blending mode to multiply, lower the opacity. All right, now I'm getting a little bit of an overflow here because nothing was clipping it, so I'm going to add a layer mask and clean up that edge there a little bit. Looks like it needs to be a little bit stronger right under the nose portion of the glass, so I'm going to come in there and try to make that one a little bit stronger. It does seem that there is something in the way there. Okay, because I lightened it up, I'm not getting it as dark right under the ridge, right under the bridge of the nose here. I want it to be a little bit darker, so I'm going to add another layer there, and I'm going to say Glasses Darken Under Bridge. Again, you can think of some shorter names if you like. And then here I will put darker tone, multiply, maybe lower the opacity a little bit. Okay, that's working fairly well. Now let's add some color to these reflections. Let's add some reflection to the glass lenses. So I'll go to the, go back to the glasses. There's my lenses. So I'm going to put a new layer above this one, above the glass shadow, and I'll call it I'll call it Lens Reflected. And I might as well name this one Left to distinguish. We might add some reflected light to the right as well. So this will be the gradient tool, back to the gradient tool, I think, and I'll use a linear gradient, select some of this blue from one of these areas here, and I want to make sure I'm on foreground to transparent, and then something like that. Let's add some reflected light over to the other side that's picking up the red. So we can just add one right above here, and that'll be Glasses, Lens Reflected. right. I'm going to sample some of the red color from this side and click and drag. Whoops, I forgot to make it a clipping mask. So you can come up here and do clipping mask, or you can do Command Option G, and then we'll put a little bit of that pinkish tone in there. Okay, so I think the same thing goes for the highlights in here. Let's select this highlight. I'm calling that a reflection, right reflection, so it's getting a little confusing naming everything. But let's go ahead and put a new layer above this one, and I'll just call it right highlight. Okay, and use my wand tool to make a selection. Okay, so it was giving me the quick selection tool. I want to come up here. The W is for both tools. I want to select the wand tool and select. All right, so I want to use the wand, the magic wand, and I want to again make sure I have sample all layers selected, and then I can click in there, and I'm going to add some and I will add something in the pink but much lighter. A little bit darker than what we've got. I'll go over to the other side. And above this one, this would be left. Maybe left lens, highlight. Select it. And I'll choose a blue color. So I'll hit the eyedropper, select the blue, and then go to a much, much lighter blue. And I think more in the turquoise. Somewhere in this range, perhaps. Let's see what that looks like. I think I could go a little bit darker. All right, I think that looks pretty good. Let's add some pink from the background to this ear. So I'm going to select that ear and make sure I'm above the outside. Make sure I'm at the top of the stack there. Make a new layer, and this would be right ear. This would be reflected light. I will use the previous as a selection. I'll sample the orange pink, or whatever you want to call it, from the background and add just a little bit of that to this ear rim here and around here. I think that needs to be and I think I'll lighten that a little bit and then add a rim highlight. So I'll just call it right ear rim highlight. Right ear rim highlight. Previous layers of clipping mask, and this will go with the white. I'll sample the white from the horn there and just try to get a little bit of a highlight around that edge. So my thinking is here, by integrating by bringing some of the background elements into the character itself, it puts the character into the environment, because that's what would happen in reality. All of the colors from the background and from near objects reflect on each other. And that gives us the sense that an object is in the environment. I think a little bit of purple here inside the ear would be nice. I'm just going to call this one Add Purple because I don't know how to describe it. It'd be the shadow, I suppose. I'm going to put it up at the top of the stack here. Select some purple and just paint in a little bit of purple there and across the bottom. Gives it a little more dimension. And it picks up the purple from the horn. So we're getting a little bit of a reflection there from the horn. All right, let's work on the nose itself. So I'll come down to the nose. Now I want to use the brush to add more shadows to the nose. So I'm going to move up above nose shadow, and I'll say nose shadow, either brush or darken. I'll just call it brush. Use the previous layer as a clipping mask. I'll start out by sampling the pink and then making it darker, maybe cooler. Okay, now let's add some shadow here. I've got the airbrush effect selected, and I'm working in the flow so that if I slow down, it does get added to it. The paint does tend to build up. Make my brush a little bit bigger and put a little bit of a tone in here so it feels a little bit more dimensional. And take some of that. Okay, I'd like to go actually a little bit darker, so I'm going to come in here and go a little darker and do this edge. We could try it on multiply and then reduce the opacity. I'm going to add a mask just to refine this edge down here at the bottom a bit. Refine this portion down here at the bottom. Soften that slightly and make his nose feel a little bit more kind of bulbous, I guess you'd say. All right, while we're here, let's go ahead and add a cast shadow under the nose. So that would be above ridge of nose, but below the nose itself, and I'm going to call it nose cast shadow. This does not need to be a clipping mask. I will choose one of the dark colors, maybe from under the glasses, and come in here and add the shadow under his nose. And maybe over here onto his jacket. Okay, so this definitely has to go on multiply, and we have to reduce the opacity. And we have to add a layer mask and clean up anything that is spilled over the shoulder here. And letting a little bit of light come around the shoulder, I think, would be nice. Something like that. Okay, there's just one more thing I'd like to do. I'd like the sun to be a little bit brighter behind Angus's head. So I've closed up all of my groups. I'm going to open up my background group, and just above the top layer in the background, I'm going to add another layer. I'll call this one Brighten Sun. And say OK. I'm going to use the gradient, radial gradient, and I'll choose a bright yellow. And then I'll click and drag right behind Angus's nose. Maybe once more over to this side. Let's see if we change it to overlay or a screen. possibly reduce the opacity just a little bit, and I think that's good. Let's save our work, and I think it's a wrap. Obviously, there's a lot more you could do. You can just keep adding more and more textures and details and highlights and shadows. I encourage you now to go in and have some fun, explore, try different things, see what you come up with, try different blend modes, add some more patterns. In future tutorials, I'm going to show you how you can easily change colors, add special effects, and so on. I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. Check out the others and let me know what you think in the comments below.